For more, we're joined now by Yossi Mekelberg, Senior Consulting Fellow with the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House. Yossi, thanks so much for being with us on the programme this evening. Firstly, the Israeli Defence Minister has reportedly been outlining plans to pack hundreds of thousands of Palestinians into a closed zone along the border with Egypt, outlining these details this week. How does Israel justify this kind of plan to set up what it's calling a so-called humanitarian city in what was once Rafah?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I think we almost got used, and we shouldn't, to this kind of euphemisms of humanitarian city when the entire Gaza enclave is tiny and it's one of the most densely populated places on planet Earth, let alone if you push 600,000, some people, the entire population of more than 2 million in such a small area. We know that it's a humanitarian disaster. It's inhumane. It's not a humanitarian city. This is not the solution. Again, we're talking about other euphemism of voluntary migration that we know it will be a forceful expulsion of Palestinians. It's probably not going to happen, but some of, like the defense minister, Israel Katz, are playing to their base more than they're probably capable of doing that. They don't even try to justify anything anymore because there is no pressure from the international community to stop it, to allow humanitarian end, to bring the war to an end. We just saw the pictures of this horrific attack on a hospital in which dozens of Palestinians are killed, completely innocent people, have nothing to do with Hamas. And this is 21 months of this war. So when this is allowed with complete impunity, if you ask me about justification, neither the defense minister nor other ministers are even bothered to actually give any justification anymore.
And talk to us a little bit more about the specific legal and ethical concerns you have. As you say, no pressure really being applied on Israel not to go ahead with this plan.
So more and more we hear even from Israeli soldiers, reservists, about what that they refuse to take certain operation because they think it's violation of war, the laws of war, of international humanitarian law. In other words, that war crimes are committed, and for now with complete impunity. This is the way that we see this picture of pictures of 70% of Gaza is destroyed, of hospitals, schools, more than 57,000 people killed, many of them again not involved with Hamas, never been involved with Hamas. Many of them are children, non-combatants. And from international law, I'm sure there will be after the war more and more investigation of that, but it's enough to see the picture, hear what Israeli soldiers say, that war crimes are committed probably on a daily basis.
And Yossi, what does this plan and the kind of rhetoric that's being used to describe it tell us about Israel's broader military goals here in Gaza?
So if you go back to the beginning of the war, the massacre about Hamas was horrific, but Israel's response has been disproportionate. But the objective was one that it's impossible, as we see, to achieve the complete elimination of Hamas, because Hamas is not just a movement. It's an idea, it's an ideology, but also the return of the hostages. And there are still 50 hostages in the hands of Hamas. And the hostages haven't been a top priority for the Israeli Prime Minister. They are top priority for most Israelis, but not for this government, because Netanyahu is dependent on the most extreme right-wing, ultra-nationalist, messianic elements within his coalition, and they want to continue this war until they basically expel most of the Palestinians, occupy Gaza, and even build or rebuild the settlements there.
And despite the optimism that's been expressed this week by both Netanyahu and also Donald Trump about the prospects of, agreeing a ceasefire for Gaza, do you have any optimism that a breakthrough might be imminent? And if it is agreed, do you think it's going to hold?
Optimism is a state of mind. We need to see something changes. I think they are deliberately create optimism while they're creating to see exactly the kind of things we have seen today. Most of the parameters, or 99% of the parameters to achieve a ceasefire are known. What is the lack of leadership, by the way, by Hamas as well. And as a result of it, you need the international community to lean on both sides to accept. As any agreement, it's not going to be perfect for either of the sides, but the current situation is horrific for the rest. So continuing to express both sides' optimism, but every day that goes by, it means more of dozens of people being killed. There's no optimism left for them.
And meanwhile, Netanyahu, he's still in the US, winding that trip up today. Do you think that behind the scenes Donald Trump is leveraging US military aid to put pressure on him to agree to the terms of a deal?
Again, we haven't seen this. There was this kind of the grotesque nomination of President Trump by Netanyahu for the Nobel Peace Prize. Flattery works with President Trump, apparently. And we haven't seen not only progress on negotiation to reach a deal, but also to stop the operation, allowing more humanitarian aid. They created a mechanism there that the Israeli military provides humanitarian aid. But what we see, people are actually shot while they are queuing to get food. I don't see any leveraging from Washington, from the White House on Israel to achieve or to reach a deal.
And what about what the EU is doing? It says today it struck a new deal with Israel to open up more crossings to increase aid into Gaza. You point out, though, that the very fact that this is being blocked, it's not a new tactic by Israel. You describe it as a tool of war. Why is it being allowed to continue?
And this is the fact. If you're not allowing humanitarian aid to civilian population, it means you do it as a tool of war in trying to, at the end of the day, for the civilian population. Either they hope that it put pressure on Hamas, but these kind of ideas have been floated and used for more than 20 years and didn't work, or the things that they will basically give up and leave, and we don't see this happening. And as long as, again, the international community doesn't use the kind of leverage that they had, this probably would continue, including the European Union. And I understand, the international agenda is saturated with so many other issues. We just saw today the visit by President Macron here in London, and the issue of migration and the issue of Ukraine. And they're all important issues, but at the same time, there is not enough attention to what is happening in Gaza and stopping it and ensuring at least that these scenes of people begging for food, for clean water, for medical aid won't be repeated day after day.
And you see, along with what's happening in Gaza, there's also mounting fears over the situation for Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, where thousands of homes are being demolished and more will be demolished in the coming weeks.
And we've seen it for many months now in some refugee camps, like in Jenin. We see almost similar operations by Israel as in Gaza. Some of the ministers actually saying that they would like to see Israel operating at least in some areas in the West Bank as they operated in Gaza. We hear about expansion of settlements, even for the first time in years, of new settlements built, which means from the current government in Israel, which is a combination of a corrupt government and a very extreme government, is not interested either to end the war, and definitely not in ending the conflict with the Palestinians in a peaceful way. And if it's led to continue, and we get, and I hope this is not the case, to the expulsion of Palestinians from Gaza, some of the same people, we probably would like to see something similar in the West Bank and the annexation, part of their messianic ideology.
And is what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, is opposition growing to it in Israel? We're hearing that people are increasingly frustrated with the government of Benjamin Netanyahu.
There is growing frustration. I think the war with Iran, that was no doubt a military success, increased a bit the popularity of Netanyahu, but not to an extent that we see in all opinion polls the opposition parties are doing better than the coalition one. There is fatigue of this war. People that serving hundreds and hundreds of days in reserve, they suffer economically. Families suffer from that. And also we saw that despite the military success with Iran, Israel is also vulnerable. So more than 70% of Israelis say time and again, and this is more than a year, they rather see the hostages back and end of war than even continuing the war and the elimination of Hamas. And they don't see that what the government promised them over the last 21 months actually is achievable.
Yossi, thanks for being with us. That's Yossi Mekelberg from Chatham House in London. That's it from us for now. Stay with us though for more World News.